In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. And Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill.
It's hard to stand in front of you and talk about abuse or violence. It's hard because I don't know that well many of you. I don't know your stories. I don't know what you went through. I do not know who experienced domestic violence in their relationship, at school, growing up. I do not know who might have experienced it this week, last night. However, I do believe that it is vital that we speak about it. Because at the end of the day, each one of us wants to be loved and want to be respected. And that's why Jesus gave us his golden rule. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. And it's really simple if you think about it, because even the most self-destructive person knows that the abuse they inflict, it's not what they really need. In 2 Samuel 13, we have the story about Amnon, Tamar, Jonadab, and David. And this is not a very popular story, or the story that we should take it lightly. And I will try to do my best not to hurt anyone by using this story. So in that story, we have David, who is the king of Israel. We had Amnon, who was his son, and we have Tamar, who was his daughter, and Jonadab, who was David's nephew. And David is the father of Tamar and Amnon, but they have different mothers, so they are half-brothers and sisters. And the scripture reading starts so beautifully. You know, taking aside that our brothers and sisters, half-brothers and sisters, those things were happening. Just think boy and girl in that sense. Some time passed, David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and David's son Amnon fell in love with her. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. I don't know, maybe it was only me, but when I was growing up, I had vivid imagination, you know, and who would fall in love with me, who would fight for me, and all those stories. And I can imagine that to be fancied by someone, knew that someone loves you so much that they can't think of anything else. They can't eat, they can't sleep, they just want to be with you. It's something to be kind of proud of, isn't it? To be loved so much. But the problem is that in that story, it's not about love. It's just purely about lust and wanting. You know, the Sabbath school, the title was excellent as well. It was, I see, I want, I get. This is kind of the essence of the story. So Amnon thinks he falls in love with Tamar and he wants her. He doesn't want to marry her. He doesn't want to court her. He just wants her. And his cousin sees how horrible he looks, how miserable he looks. And he comes and he says, how can I help? You know, we have to do something about it. I have to help you. We are family. Let me help you. So he creates this plan, and he tells him, ask your father king to come to you, and pretend you are ill. So David, of course, comes to Amnon, and he visits him, and Amnon is pretending that he's so ill, and he asks his father for a favor, and he says, "Father, could Tamar come and just cook me a meal? That will really make me feel better." And David, of course, loving his son, says, "Of course, she can." It wasn't something common that she would come and visit his brother because she was a virgin. And so she needed her father's permission to do that. And she comes, and she cooks, and she prepares the meal, and she wants to give it to the brother, and he refuses. And I will stop there, because Amnon becomes cruel. And Amnon used his dominion and power over Tamar. And he does something that he shouldn't do, something that nobody should do to anybody. And if you want, you can read the story for yourself in your free time and read the details of the story. But this story becomes just a bit uncomfortable memory for Amnon. Because when it happens, he doesn't want to see the sister, he just disgusted with her, and he sends her away. So there is uncomfortable story. She's a reminder of a cruelty. She's a reminder of a sin. But for Tamar, her dreams and hopes stopped. She will never marry. She will never have children. Because now she's a reminder of his selfishness, of his lust. Amnon took away her future. He took away her chance to embrace womanhood. But she was the daughter of the king. She was the envy of so many women. Tamar, a princess and the most wanted bride in the whole Israel. Tamar, one of the most privileged young women. But now Tamar goes to live with her brother Absalom and remains there a desolate woman. We all went through some kind of abuse at some time in our life, at workplace, at school. For some, it could be just one accident, one incident. For some, it's continuity. When a woman suffers from domestic abuse, it takes about 7 years for her to actually tell anyone what she's going through. But if she's a Christian, it takes double the amount to tell someone that she's going through something. Should that be the opposite? Should it be straight away? Should we have the churches, the congregation, the prayer groups that we can come and we can share, and that we know that we are not allowing this to happen? But in that story, I don't want to focus on this, what Amnon did, how Tamar lived afterwards, what she went through. I want to focus on David's reaction to the whole situation. And in verse 21, we read this. When King David heard all of these things, he became very angry. But he would not punish his son Amnon, because he loved him, for he was his firstborn. So David gets angry. he's supposed to get angry. When bad things happen, when evil things happen, this is the first reaction. We're supposed to get angry, we're supposed to get shocked, we're supposed to want to try and make a difference. And he gets angry. And I can imagine that he is a heartbroken father because he knew what happened to Tamar. He knows her future. But he just is angry. He uses his words, but there is no action. Justice is served neither by useless anger that takes no action, nor by violent revenge. In 1933, Hitler came to power and persecution towards Jewish people escalated. People in governments around the world, they knew what was happening, and they knew that Nazis were encouraging violence and vandalism against Jews. However, before the Second World War started, when they all knew what was happening, only Dominican Republic changed the immigration policy for Jewish people to help them escape to safety. Only Dominican Republic. None of the other countries changed it to make it easier. And looking at any history of evil, any history of nation against nation, race against nation, we never learn from history. We never learn kindness from history. We never learn tolerance from history. We just repeat the same mistakes, and we are as close-minded and racist and selfish as our past generation was. But you know, we can make a difference. And I don't want to now trivialize what I'm talking about. But we all can be more like Colombo. Have you heard about Colombo? It's an American TV series. Now you know? Well, I grew up in Poland, so Colombo, I think it was in 80s, but in Poland it was in 90s. And I really like this TV series. It was about Colombo. He was the main detective, and he was a homicide detective. And, you know, there was always a case to be solved. And whenever he came to solve the case, he always looked scruffy. He had this coat that looks like nobody washed it or ironed it. He always looked like he just woke up. And he would try to solve the crime. And he would look around, and he would play stupid. And nobody would take him seriously. So the killer or the person who murdered, they would never see him as a threat because he wasn't powerful enough. So he would always agree and ask those silly questions, and they would just get annoyed with him. But at the end, almost when he was leaving, he would always turn back and really confused, like he just thought about that, he would ask a question. One more thing. One more thing. Tell me this. And it would always lead to solving the crime. He always would ask this last question, He had the whole conversation with them, and at the end he would come back and ask this question, who would help him to solve the crime. And I think when we meet people and we ask how they are doing, and we hear okay, and we just walk, we should always come back and ask this one more question. Whatever it is. We see people who don't look themselves. They're a bit sad. They're a bit under the weather. But we sometimes pretend to ignore that because we can't deal with another problem. And then we become like David. Because we would say, yes, a church, we should do this, and we should have more ministries, and we should go out and do things. But when we are faced with our own problems here, we just get angry, we get upset, and there's no action. And I'm preaching that to myself, because this is what we tend to do. But we should be like Colombo and try to ask this last question. Take more information. And I know that we are all different, and there are extroverts and introverts, and it's harder for some than others, but there is so much kindness that we can share. Once I was really upset in the church, and it was in the family service. And there was this song that just broke me emotionally. I think actually, Kurt, you were singing it, and then I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. So I went to the vestry, and then I sat down, and then there was like a waterfall coming, and like your mind is telling you just stop, like control yourself, woman, to try to, you are in public place, but sometimes you just can't, and you break, and then you cry. And when I was crying so much, I was just sitting and crying, Sylviane came to me, and she sat next to me, and she just put her hand around me, and she didn't ask questions. She was just showing me her love and care. And for the whole sermon, I was crying, so half an hour of her sitting with me. But that was one of the most kindest things I will ever remember about Newbold, this one act of kindness. And I will never forget that. And I think that's why I ask Asun as well in front, because it's so important to be kind to each other in the way that we really care. Because if we try to be, I will say again, Colombo, and ask those questions lead to relationship. Because it shows that I care, that I really care, that I don't want to just ask you, how are you, and then pass by. And sometimes we are in a rush and there is no time. But is it really any good time to ask those questions? God gave us a promise, and he gave us his words. But there was also time for action, for sending his son, Jesus, to come here and show us how it's done and save us. There is a time for words, but there is a time for action. Don't use just your words without the action. Because when Jesus came here, he showed us how to treat each other. He showed us how equal we all are. Children, women, men, doesn't matter. We're all equal in his eyes. And if we will have the same atmosphere here, if we can create atmosphere in this church of safety, how beautiful it will be. That if someone cries in the church, it's not another gossip, but it's a time to come together and pray for healing. I love Newbold Church. I wouldn't move anywhere else because of what's happening here. But sometimes it's more about a style of worship than people, and it should be the opposite. Doesn't matter who is preaching, doesn't matter who sings. It matters because we feel safe, that we can embrace Jesus fully and come with our broken hearts and come with our emptiness and just being filled again. I would like to finish my sermon with this poem. It was written by Martin Niemöller, sorry for the pronunciation, But he wrote it in the times when so many people did nothing. So many people felt it's not about them. It's not their problem. And I hope that God can use us to be fearless in loving and fearless in being kind to each other. So no one can relate to this poem. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.